Yo, what's up, guys? We are live here in the panhandle of Florida, Matt Gaetz territory, in a state that is tearing down the gates to make sure that we are prepared for the hurricane. This is a special hurricane bunker briefing on the Benny Show. I thank you, Congressman, for being here.
Well,
what's up,
this
bro?
is the bougiest refugee experience I've ever been a part of. I do want to let folks know the Bay Center in Pensacola, for those who are unable to have the beachside cottage escape from the hurricane, if you don't have any money and you need to evacuate, y'all come to Pensacola. In Florida One, we've got the Pensacola Bay Center open. We've got cots. We've got all the essentials people need. You'll be totally safe. And we just want to make sure that resources aren't a reason people stay in a dangerous situation. But, I mean, we're watching something kind of crazy here. We're seeing people in North Carolina and in Appalachia still frustrated that the relief isn't coming. When private citizens go there to provide water, diapers, the essentials for people, they're often encountering a lot of resistance from FEMA. You've seen people deployed and then not really given orders as to what to do. You've seen even FEMA officials mobilized without clear direction as to where they can help people. That's what's playing out right now in North Carolina and Appalachia. And in Florida, by contrast, you have a governor who has completely taken charge. You've got an emergency response system that is resilient, that is activated. And when I saw this story about Pinellas County, close to your territory, and them tearing down the debris gates, I just want to set the stage for this, okay? In these storms, you get a ton of debris, roof parts, you get different tree limbs, and you got to get that off the power lines, out of the roads to get normal life going. So DeSantis smartly, before the storm, puts out this order, and he says, if you hold a license for a dumping place for debris, you have to be open 24/7. Okay, very smart, because he's putting the people first. And one of these entities in Pinellas County, they just defied DeSantis's order and they shut the gates to their debris removal. And I know the guy who runs our Florida Highway Patrol. He actually was a Democrat in the state legislature. And DeSantis hires a Democrat to go run the Florida Highway Patrol because he just happens to be one of the most competent people on operations. And he tells the governor that he is ripping down the gates here at this Pinellas County debris removal place. They get the Ford F-150s, they tie the chains to the things, and they rip it down, and they deliver for the people, and they're not going to let some red tape or some bureaucracy get in the way. And so, what is that telling us right now, where you've got Roy Cooper messing it up in North Carolina, DeSantis doing everything right in Florida, and then you've got this disaster response that, I mean, the worst flavor you would put on this, the worst lens, would be it's on purpose. Because if you don't help the people in South Georgia, if you don't help the people in Western North Carolina, then you can have an impact on the Electoral College. Like, do you have that pessimistic a view as to why this is happening? I've heard the view expressed.
Yes. Yes and no. So there's two ways to come at this. One, it's very close to the election, and you're like, well, why would they want these people to vote? This is Trump country. But then two, you zoom back out and you realize they did nothing for the people in Maui and in Lahaina.
Yeah.
And that's like, there's not a single Republican in that town. And they let those poor working class people burn alive. And in fact, the federal government locked the gates. Speaking of, there's an AP article about this, how the only people that survived in Lahaina, Maui, Democrat stronghold, is the people who defied the federal government and left. And they weren't at all concerned about their lives either. And so at some point you have to step back and say, like, wait a second, do they care about Americans at all? Right? Like,
yeah, because I could believe both theories. Like, I could believe the theory that if this thing was like an earthquake in San Francisco, you'd have every resource available. You'd be taking care of folks. You wouldn't be having anyone die that didn't need to die. And then the other view is maybe it's just become all so incompetent.
Yes.
That it doesn't even have to be on purpose.
Yeah.
That these institutions that we want to work in the time of need, like everybody who criticizes my vision for the party is anti-institutionalist. No, I want a strong FEMA. I want a strong Department of Defense. I want a National Guard that can mobilize and meet our needs. But when like DBI becomes the operative theory, and on the FEMA trainings, they're talking about equity being the core value premise rather than saving lives. Like how do we get away from saving lives and move toward like how do we end up with the greatest amount of equity in our disaster response?
They're not setting the best. Like you can see, I mean, you see that in the like Kamala Harris briefing with FEMA, but they set the same amount of money and say it's like $700 to the people who had their entire city burned alive in Lahaina. At some point, you have to like assume, man, maybe they just structurally hate Americans and want to, fund fantasies and excursions overseas, and they actually don't care for the people here. They just see us as tax cattle.
So did you ever watch House of Cards? Yeah. So, I mean, you remember one of the plot lines when Frank Underwood becomes president is he steals all the money from FEMA to go do his jobs program in D.C., and I'm like watching this play out now where reality is mirroring fiction, right? Because now you've got all of this housing assistance that was under DHS and under FEMA. Okay. So like a regular appropriate or regular person might reasonably think under FEMA, housing assistance is going to be there for Americans who need housing in a time of disaster. And that particular pot of $640 million is what has been spent putting the illegal aliens up in 4-star, housing hotels in Manhattan. And they've allowed these sanctuary cities and sanctuary states to draw down on this federal money. And now they're saying, oh, well, we don't have the resources if someone is displaced because their house was taken off of its foundation in, outside of Asheville, North Carolina.
So you have a whistleblower in FEMA that has come forward and elucidated what to your office?
The extent to which assets mobilized were not utilized. And when you see these efforts by all the private citizens to try to get resources to people who desperately need them for life-saving measures, it's so frustrating when we're not the only ones seeing that. The people who work at FEMA who got orders to show up at a hotel or to move to a particular place in Georgia to provide support, they see it too, and then they're not getting clear direction from their own leadership, and then they're watching all the cost associated with a mobilization, but then not the result. And it's not just one whistleblower. I got in the last 24 hours, I spoke to a FEMA employee who had been mobilized but had nothing to do upon mobilization and wanted to help. People don't sign up. This is not the fault of the FEMA workers. They actually love their fellow Americans and want to help them. But then you get to, is it purposeful delay? Because actually for Democrats, it would be nice if 10,000 people didn't come home in Valdosta, Georgia, and were spread all over the country, a disparate in their ability to cast a vote. And so you wonder if it's that, or if it's just, just giving orders around here is such a hard thing to do. Let's send my Orcus back to go buy some more fancy men's clothing or whatever. There's another corollary to this story at FEMA, and it's in an Inspector General report. This isn't a whistleblower. This is a public Inspector General report that says there are hundreds of disasters dating back to the early 2000s where the Congress had appropriated money and grants that were authorized had never been executed. The people who won the grant award never did the work from stuff from decades ago. And so the Inspector General says, well, the terms of those grants allow you to then bring the funds back into disaster relief, which you could use for the disasters that are going on right now. But instead of pulling back the money, Mayorkas and FEMA just keep extending the grants, sometimes for years, sometimes for decades. In one case, a grant extended over 16 years for something that happened way back then when you got folks in need right now, and you could use that money. So simultaneously, they've used housing assistance money intended for Americans for illegal aliens housing and disaster money that should be available. They've got stuck in a bureaucratic churn, probably driven more by special interest than national interest.
How does an organization like FEMA with so much incompetence continue on? Because right now, I think there's like a desire, if someone were to present a plan to take the FEMA money and just give it to the states and break up and allocate it for the states to operate their own emergency management, people would say, like, yeah, probably let's do that.
We would take that in Florida.
Let's give billions more to Florida so that Florida can do its own work because it's going to do the work better than we can.
Yeah, I would prefer to have a FEMA that operated effectively. Like, of all of the federal agencies that you and I would probably scratch off of the list, the Department of Education, the EPA, the Department of Labor, things that just very quickly we would probably abolish with the stroke of a pen. I wouldn't put FEMA on that list because there are times when you have these natural disasters, they cross state lines, they require a really robust federal response. And we believe in federally funded, state coordinated, locally executed disaster response. Mm-hmm. And that's why you see these heroes at the emergency operations centers in Hillsborough County, Pinellas County. You'll see them Citrus County, all up and down the Florida coast, doing that great work with the state coordination. And I do think there has to be federal resourcing. The problem is when you get incompetent management and then you get a corrosive doctrine that overlay one another, it paralyzes you. And then you spice in like a malintent to not help certain groups of people. It becomes a concoction of failure.
That's like election rigging in the darkest sense. You're like election rigging over dead bodies.
Yeah.
That's what everyone tells us.
Simpler days when they were just willing ballots into existence.
Right.
I mean, simpler days.
To, like, hack the machines. And now it's like that's almost more pure than we'll make sure that these people's bodies stay in the mud for the next couple of months. And we'll be ordering body bags, thousands of them, which is what's going on actually in Asheville. Mm-hmm. We have a friend who works at the Asheville hospital, and he's telling me that they've gotten extra 1,000 body bags ordered. They're like pulling people out of they just did a training 2 days ago about how to find a dead body under the water, right? How to like search for, because there's so many bodies floating through the water. And they're not getting any heat from this. Like Kamala's not, I don't know. I'm not sure. Is she actually getting heat from this? Is Kamala actually feeling like some blowback? It does seem like she's sort of on the brink of collapse here, and they're doing some desperate treading of water, for lack of a better term. But it's like this is worse than Katrina, right? But it didn't happen to a large metropolitan. It didn't happen to a Philadelphia, so people don't care as much, and that's like really cruel.
It's dark. It actually says a very dark thing, and I think we would both wish, regardless of any politics, that those people didn't have to die. Yes. You know, that if we'd have had the right pre-posture in North Carolina, if you saw the state of North Carolina taking the pre-storm efforts that you saw in Florida, and granted, we're a little more used to it.
I saw no efforts in North Carolina.
It was very scant.
I can't find them.
We had our legislative delegation already organized, already getting a pre-disaster declaration from the president. We already had our emergency operations centers doing tabletop exercises in the hours before the storm. We had the low-lying areas covered with shelters and evacuation plans and notices. No, in Florida, we had all that for Helene. No, Helene actually came up in the Perry area, Steinhatchee, Sopchoppy, those communities got the brunt of Helene, but we were all ready for that, and we have good muscle memory for it. In North Carolina, I don't know that you got the same pre-storm action, and so regardless of politics, we wish that things would have happened where those people didn't have to die. But if we're looking at what this means for an election that's in less than 4 weeks now, I don't know that the storm and the response itself would be a major game changer, but I think right now a lot of persuadable voters just feel in crisis, like in one way or another. Maybe you had a family member that you're worried any day is going to die of a fentanyl poisoning. Maybe you're worried that like your employer keeps having reductions in force rather than hiring. Maybe you're worried about your insurance payment that's coming due, your escrow going up, the fact that you can't downsize your house now because your starter or your mortgage has locked you in forever. Like people just kind of feel in battle. They turn on the news. We got war breaking out in 2 different places elsewhere in the world. And then you see this storm hit. And you see that the Biden-Harris crew, they can't do it. They can't handle it, obviously. And so then it starts to make you wonder, what are the other crises that I can believe in them to resolve? Of all the, maybe the storm isn't your crisis. Maybe meeting the grocery bill is your crisis. But if you see that this government that Harris is clearly, claiming credit for and in charge of, can't even get people off of their freaking roof as the water is rising, how are they going to get you into a better mortgage payment?
Yes, bro, there's 20% satisfaction with the state of the American experience right now, according to Gallup. 80% of the country is dissatisfied with the direction of America. Kamala Harris twice yesterday is like, wouldn't change anything, actually. I think things are going great. She said,
how was she not ready for that?
And on Colbert, she cracked a beer and said, yo, I think things are going great. Political malpractice, I would argue.
Well, and that was the key distinction in the debate with Harris and Trump. Like, a lot of the talking heads were critical of Trump, but Trump actually reflected the frustration and the angst, and at times the anger that the American people have right now with what's going on in this country. Whereas the like everything is awesome vibes aren't connecting to that suburban swing voter outside of Milwaukee who's wondering like how they're going to be able to support a growing family, or how they're going to be able to see that the business where they work is more successful, not less successful in the coming year. And so, those voters, I think, look at the failures around the storm and they say, these people aren't going to deliver for me. And there's great nostalgia for the Trump economy.
I think there's I'm feeling like Jimmy Carter, like 1980 feeling, where one side's very serious about the problems going on and one side's like just cruising on vibes alone and like good feelings. And I think
do they have the View clip? Have you run the View thing before? I mean, the View. It's like 18. Her on the View out there. Maybe the guys will let us know.
We grab the View. So I want to touch real quickly because this has been blowing up my phone. DeSantis, you're coming in and you're like praising DeSantis. I'm very proud of our governor for nuking Kamala Harris, trying to weasel her way in for like political points to profiteer off the pain and suffering of the American people. Can you set the record straight? She has never helped the state of Florida. Is this correct?
Yeah, and she has no role in this. Okay, there are important conversations that at times do need to occur between the governor and the president, and you've seen the governor and the president put politics aside and deal with that, which, by the way, they've done in the past in storms. Yeah. But did you ever see Kamala Harris show the first bit of interest in the other storms that have hit Florida, or, by the way, anywhere else? Like, no. Okay, she has never, ever been involved in this. Now she's trying to insert herself in it for politics, and DeSantis is having none of it. And good for him. DeSantis is a focused, serious guy. He takes disaster response very seriously, and he's not going to sit there and be part of her, narrative building while trying to figure out how to get the debris off the streets in Pinellas County.
Yeah, bro. Is this your third term?
I think I've just completing my fourth and on my way to my fifth term. Gosh, the time flies. Oh man, I'm getting long in the tooth, man.
So you're in this game, and it just seems again like political malpractice to attack the governor who's facing two deadly hurricanes back to back in as many weeks. It seems like now she's like on a tarmac, sniping at DeSantis. She's like attacking him, and being like, "How dare he? Not take my call?" Like. What kind of like mean girl bitch energy is this? It's just like very, very bad look for her. And you could see she changed that up like real fast, okay? Like when given her talkers. But she's sitting there like going after DeSantis, who's got bodies. I mean, there are 25 people in Pinellas County alone that died. They got bodies like floating. And she's attacking him and now bracing for, and you can see it out the windows here, like bracing for like a monster storm.
It's a narcissism.
She's dumb.
Well, it's deeply
politically stupid.
I think that sometimes it's just the narcissism, right? It's not really about for her the desperate people in North Carolina, the dead bodies in Florida. Was she appropriately respected? Right? She's actually the victim of Hurricane Helene because Ron DeSantis would rather talk to her boss Joe Biden than her.
The entire worldview is based on victimhood, so of course.
Well, but how are you reading the Biden response to the Kamala failures? Because he clearly hates her. He hates her, and the press conference.
What do you know? Do you like?
Well, I mean, I'm watching this press conference. Joe Biden has not done a single press conference. Right? She's getting dogged for not.
Biden.
No, it's Joe. Joe had not done a single press conference from the White House briefing room, okay? Had never gone in there before, his entire presidency. She's getting dogged on the trail for not doing a formal press conference. And so he just rolls in there and does one. It is such an epic troll. It is such a troll. I mean, and then she goes out there with her Mean Girls moment on DeSantis, and then he just happens. I mean, they've been hiding this guy in the basement forever, and he emerges just to be like, "Oh, Ron's doing a great job."
I got his number.
Yeah,
Bro was like, got his number. Actually, we text.
yeah.
He sent me an emoji.
So what is the third one? Because these things always come in threes, right?
Right,
So
right.
Joe Biden definitely has another round in the chamber for Kamala Harris following his press conference and then his laudatory remarks toward DeSantis.
What's going on with Joe Biden? He's wearing MAGA hats. He's, you've seen the political creature that is Joe Biden. Joe Biden was vice president.
Joe Biden's got his deal.
Like, what's the deal?
Don't you think?
Why is he wearing MAGA hats? Why is Joe? Is it like demon possession? Suddenly he was exorcised and like he doesn't have it anymore. Like, how's that work exactly?
Well, I mean, Joe Biden did not want to cede the nomination.
That's right. Yes.
No one believes that he wanted to do that.
Up to and including 24 hours before he resigned.
Yeah.
So there's a scheduled tweet.
Yeah.
There's a scheduled tweet that went up that said, "I'm staying in the race. I'm Joe Biden." 24 hours later.
So he was muscled out by Nancy Pelosi and Barack Obama.
Story, will you?
We know that. We know that the actual alphas in the Democratic Party are Obama and Pelosi. Yeah. They're highly organized people who have the moneyed interests following their direction. So they are the puppet masters. And when they wanted Joe Biden out, I mean, it was a true test of the powers of the presidency versus the powers of kind of the liberal elites who control large swaths of the country. And at times I was like, well, the powers of the presidency have to prevail. Joe Biden is the president. He got all the votes in the nominating process. That is a really good hand to play. But that hand failed against Obama and Pelosi, and they were just going to make it more and more painful every day.
What was the strategy? What were they going to do next?
every few days there were more releases. Look,
they were getting pretty mean to him. They were pretty savage, like leaking and everything. It felt like the Trump years all over again. Yeah. It was like suddenly everyone's leaking about what a jackass Joe Biden is, what a bastard.
Phase one was every few days there's going to be a letter signed by different Democrat lawmakers saying you need to leave. And so every few days, all you're going to be responding to is people saying you can't do it. And then the sword of Damocles was the 25th Amendment. They told him, like, if we get to a critical mass of those and you still haven't gone, we're going to 25th Amendment you. And so, like, Biden then, what occurred between Biden realizing he had to get out and him getting out was his negotiated package. Because with the Bidens, like, it's always about the money at the end of the day. Yeah. And so he got his negotiated package where they're going to have their financial opportunities post-presidency. I do think part of the package was pardons for Hunter and anybody else, James Biden, anyone else in the family who might need a pardon, and kind of what his role is going to be as a vaulted figure. And I think after he got his deal and understood what his economic package was going to be and kind of what the jurisprudence package was going to be, he was sort of like, to hell with this, man. Like, this lady pushed me out. Obama and Pelosi pushed me out. Yeah. And every day I think he hates them a little more and hates Trump a little less. Yeah. And he's Irish. I mean, I get it. You get your Irish up.
But now he's actively sabotaging her. You got to just assume that. We've never seen Joe Biden.
So what's the next thing he does? Let's prognosticate. He did the press conference. Like, you follow where she's being attacked. She was being attacked on the hurricane, so he trolled her on that with the DeSantis thing. She was being attacked on the no press conference thing.
Oh, I got it. So I got it. Here's what I think.
Okay.
I think I think they're going to go to their few friends left in the media, and they're going to say it was Kamala's cocaine.
It was Kamala's cocaine. You think that? I was thinking something like way more trash.
Like, yeah, you know what? Hunter's clean as a whistle. It was Kamala. Who else could have brought that in? And that's why they had.
Let me throw out my prediction.
Timestamp
this. I bet you he goes to Ukraine before the end of his presidency. I bet he goes to Ukraine and says, this is my great legacy. I've protected this democratic institution. Gets all these eyeballs on him, and then there she is, like, trying to get the country to believe she's a new direction, and he's soaking up the attention, in like a silver alert across Europe.
Maybe he appoints a special counsel to look into Doug Emhoff's spousal abuse.
Doug Emhoff is an interesting character.
Dude, what's that guy like? He seems creepy, man.
I've never been around him, but I'm just imagining it's 3 a.m. at the Cannes Film Festival in 2012, right? You've like been inside. I don't know, like, what people. I've never been to the Cannes Film Festival, but I'm guessing there's a good amount of booger sugar that goes on there. Yeah. And then these guys roll out. There's a long line for the valet. It's 3 a.m. she tries to go give the valet like $100 or something to get in the front. Valet says, lady, get back in line. And then she starts like rubbing up on the valet, and Doug Emhoff goes and gives this woman the back of his hand. I mean, isn't that kind of the report? It's a wild story.
The report was that she was flirting with someone and that he smacked her. Yeah.
Like the valet, not like.
Well, at the very least, okay, so people can report lies about you, right?
Right, yeah.
And that's fine.
Fact.
Well, yeah, that's right. Fact. Innocent until proven guilty. But at the very least, you should get a question about that, right? So it's been credibly reported. A bunch of her friends have come forward. She's identified. There's a bunch of photos of him and her. So at the very least, like, ask the bro a question, like, "Yo, did you hit a woman?"
If he says no, I mean,
publicly like abuse a woman.
Yeah.
Right? Like ask her. We know your history with your first wife and the nanny and your kids' teachers, and you knocked her up, and she was under duress, lost the baby. That's dark, man. And so it fits a character profile, and the whole like, aw shucks, dork dad routine doesn't really quite lock in with the spousal abuser routine. Somebody's hiding something. You see it in his eyes. He's hiding something, man. You know how sometimes like when one woman will like do really well, like a group of her friends will try to drag her down. Yeah.
Are we doing that to Doug Emhoff? I mean, Doug Emhoff broke gender barriers as the second gentleman. Are we just expressing our like deep-seated jealousy and own insecurity that this record-breaking, this barrier-breaking second gentleman of a man we're tearing him down the way like women in the 80s used to do to each other in the corporate world.
Bro, Doug Emhoff on TV grabbed the back of the first lady's head and just locked lips with her.
Don't hate the player. You're hating the game.
That's just like Joe Biden's sitting there going, like, watching the whole thing. It's like something's dark going on with these people. Something's weird. Everyone watched that and was like, that's weird, man. Something's creepy. You must see a lot of creepy stuff up in Congress.
Honestly, Benny, it's the corruption. I mean, it's not.
Is that it?
I'm not here to be be the bedroom police for anybody and whatever anybody's got going on. But to me, it's just like, it's so sad to be walking around underneath the busts of Jefferson and Adams and Washington, and like to watch people sell out for a $2,000 PAC check, and to see somebody like, it's so open and obvious. Lobbyists will come up to members and say, "Hey, oh yeah, we really need you to sign that letter saying you'll support this amendment, and we'll see you at the fundraiser tonight." And honestly, there are times I just wish like James O'Keefe would wire me up and I could go in there and show you. But actually, by now they already hate me, and so I don't have no one would like share any confidence with me because they all hope that I'm not there anymore.
Yeah.
But it was so sad to see, and you go between anger and sadness, and I just don't get it. It doesn't have to be this way. And some of these people are like highly competent people. Like hold on, you went and made $50 million, sold your business, put $1 million into your own congressional campaign, ran like just so you could get up there and be the valets for the fundraisers and special interests. That's what you did it for? I don't get it.
And this is the most sanitized version of this, because my close childhood friend who worked for Senator for my home state, Chuck Grassley, would tell me about when they first got into the Senate, right? When he first got into the Senate. I'm not going to name names here, but dude, he was like, they introduced me to the cloakroom, and this was before, man, what was the scandal? The lobbying scandal with the suites at Jack Abramoff.
Yeah,
Okay, that was before that, right? So this is like old school. Like old school Senate was just bags of cash. I mean, the cloakroom was a bag of cash.
Dude, if you
and
go,
they would hand out cash to the senators or their staffers. Senators got smart, and so you just send someone there. And there was physical cash. This is like in the 90s and early aughts. Fistfuls of cash just being handed out inside the cloakroom before votes. And this person's not a liar. I'm from Iowa, right? Like, if you're one thing from Iowa, you're not a liar, right? Nobody needs to lie there. Like, that's the way it worked.
In the Longworth office building, there are still safes in the members' office as vestiges of those years when members could take cash in their office.
Bro.
There's like, I had my last term.
Walks in your office and hands you cash.
There are still safes from that. The handing of the cash in the offices, I have not observed during my time in Congress, but just the fact that like you could still have one of the old offices that has the safe in it where that used to go down. And I saw a lot of it just these last few weeks because the one place in the Capitol where you can hand someone a check is on the floor. On the floor, you can hand somebody a check.
You're joking.
It's the only real estate where you can do that. So think about it. In these last few weeks, a whole lot of members, the House floor, right? That's the place where you're by rule allowed to hand someone a campaign check. So we're about to go on the whole.
Aren't down there. They're not allowed on the floor.
No, but your fellow members can. So it's the leadership and the people who want to be in leadership and the people who want to be on a different committee and the people who want to be chairman of a committee. So all the kind of member to member favor stuff gets recorded in the currency of campaign donations. And we were about to go on this 4-week break before the election. And so you could just only imagine how much the checks were flying on the floor this last week. Just so happened to be when we passed that crappy continuing resolution. So as we're taking the one vote on the continuation of the funding of the whole government, everybody's out there saying, oh, I'd really like to be on the Ways and Means Committee. Oh, well, if this subcommittee chairmanship opens up, I sure hope you'll support me. I'd really like to lead our state delegation. Here's my support for you before the general election. That was pervasive. And this is not one side or the other. It's both sides.
Yes, that's become evident. That's become very, very clear that the corruption is endemic and that the red team, blue team, there is no angels or devils when it comes to the corruption. It's rampant, and it's why people love the Elon Musk plan. Get rid of 80% of the federal government, get rid of this system. Is it even possible, though, right? Like, does the corruption go so deep that it's going to be like the Soviet Union and the entire system has to implode before there's any change?
My theory of the case is obviously that we just have to keep shooting at the Death Star. And when I took out McCarthy, there was this view that like everything was going to change. We were going to have a fully liberated House, amendments, single subject spending bills. And I wish that removing McCarthy had resulted in more change than it did. It resulted in some change and it resulted in meaningful change. But we are largely still funding the government through the continuing resolutions.
FISA vote, for Johnson.
Terrible.
I do not understand.
No, FISA, Ukraine. We expanded FISA. They were violating FISA more than 25 times an hour at the FBI for years, and we gave them more authorities. So very disappointing in some of those fronts. But I do think it showed that the machine doesn't win every time. Now, the machine's resilient, right? When you shoot at it and maybe take off a wing or take off a rudder, it reassembles and it does its best to right itself. But like I saw the very same lobbyists who owned McCarthy, like doing everything they could within minutes to get their hooks in Johnson or whomever came next. And so you gotta, I think, honestly, what I need is more backup. I need more Ana Paulina Lunas, people like Eric Burleson, people like Andy Ogles, Eli Crane, Andy Biggs. Those are the type of people who wake up every day shooting at the Death Star. And we're going to get a few more. And Abe Hamadeh is going to be a great member of Congress. Brandon Gill is going to be a great member of Congress. We're going to get a few more. And then we've got to radicalize others to the belief that if this corrupt system persists, all you're going to get are these incompetent or malign institutions like we're seeing now, where the poor people in North Carolina are having water raising and they're desperately pleading for help, while an incompetent government couldn't serve their needs while it was sending billions more to Ukraine and trying to figure out what the next DEI initiative was going to be so we could all achieve equity.
Yeah, that's right. Equity. You're seeing it with Kamala Harris.
Yeah, it's all shit. Everything goes to shit as your equity.
Yeah, that's right. Trump, that's a Trump paraphrase. Trump's doing good. You got some internals on Trump. It seems like they're running scared. There's been an energy shift in the last week, bro.
I get that on the vibes level. Now, I'm a worrier. I am politically by my nature a worrier. The reason to worry is there remain tens of thousands of people currently displaced in 2 states that we were looking very good and that we have to win. Yeah. We have to win Georgia and North Carolina. They're key. We have 3 paths. We have the Atlantic Coast path, which is Pennsylvania, Georgia, North Carolina. We win that, we're going to win the election. Then we have the Sun Belt path, which is North Carolina, Georgia, Arizona, Nevada. We win those 4. We win the election. And then there's the Great Lakes path, which is the Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Michigan path. Now, if Georgia and North Carolina are key to 2 of the 3 vectors to victory. So we got to win those. And I was just meeting with the team in Georgia. I did a rally in Kennesaw for the president, and they're worried about that Valdosta area where people had their homes taken off of their platforms. And the supervisors of elections offices had major disruption in power and getting the mail. And like that didn't hit Fulton County and Cobb County and DeKalb County, right? They're running at high octane, but it's the places in Southeast Georgia that got hammered. Like that has me in cold sweats every night. The same for the people in Western North Carolina. If you look where President Trump builds his margin, it is in that old Madison Cawthorn, Mark Meadows district that's got Highlands, Cashers, a lot of those places. And people there, like they just got power back in a lot of those places. So we get any diminution in those areas, like all the vibes in the world aren't going to be able to more than account for that. Now, fortunately, we got a great team at the RNC. My man, James Blair, fellow Tampa guy, is the political director there and for the campaign. Yeah. And I know they are relentlessly pursuing these voters with text messages, digital display ads, IP addresses when available, right. So, everything we can do. But those folks, you have to vote. You have to vote by mail. If you're unable to get back to your polling place or to your normal life, you have to request a mail ballot.
Mobile voting centers now in North Carolina because the RNC.
Yeah,
James Blair.
Yeah,
they're going to do mobile voting centers. Set up like a truck, or something like that. I don't know.
Yeah, but if you had to move,
if I should be more scared about that or not.
Well, look, anything we can do to get those votes cast is critically important, but that mobile voting center isn't going to resolve the issue where you went to live with your cousin in Arkansas while you rebuild your life in North Carolina. Those people are going to have to use the mail.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Here's the good news, though. The good news is if you look at the vote by mail requests in Pennsylvania, they're at about like 20% of what they were this time 4 years ago. Very, very low kind of by volume generally, which to me shows a diminution in enthusiasm on the left far more than on the right. And if we reduce the number of those ballots that are sent out, then there's an ecosystem that is not as ripe for fraud. Like what fraud requires is a massive amount of vote by mail ballots swirling around that can be collected and voted without an individual actually intending to cast that vote. That is the core thing that the fraud requires. And so if you put downward pressure on that, then you get less fraud.
So it's like the house has been wiped off the face of the earth, yet there's 100 registered voters there, right?
Yeah.
And those ballots got shipped.
Right.
And then they got returned and then there's no tracking.
Well, I think the more likely fact pattern is at a massive apartment complex in Philly.
Yeah, that happened in Arizona. So in Phoenix, that's a story right now. Plot of dirt that has 100 registered voters at it, right? It's just like,
oh, and that's in these urban areas where there's an apartment complex where maybe that apartment has had 4 families in it in the last 5 years. So you're going to get, you could have 20 ballots show up there and 2 people live there.
In DC, I got a stack of ballots this thick. Bro.
Yeah, and then if you've got a really sympathetic mail carrier, and if you've got a political operative who's ready to show up and come into receipt of those ballots, the signature verification is not the end all be all, because in a lot of these places, there is no broad adoption of cursive. Like how broadly do you think cursive is adopted in some downtown Philadelphia apartment complex? They don't teach cursive anymore. It's not anybody's fault. Cursive is not taught in schools anymore. And so people at the supervisors of elections offices are accepting mail ballots with just block lettering name written on it, no signature. And then that would be very easy to inject fraud into. And in fact, I believe that's happened in a lot of places.
What happens from a federal level? So let's say it's too big to rig, sweep, federal level. What's currently passed in the House? HR 1, is it? Like what's currently passed in the House to fix elections or to defraud the fraud?
Well, obviously the SAVE Act is our leadoff hitter, right? Because that takes out the illegals voting, which is a real concern, not in every jurisdiction. In most jurisdictions in America, we've actually got pretty responsible elections officials, and I don't want to cast any dispersions on them, but like if just in Clark County, Nevada, you let the illegals vote, you change the whole complexity of that state's overall contribution to the Electoral College. So if in just a few places you get bad behavior, you can dilute people's legitimate vote. So that's critically important. And I'm not one who wants to overly federalize elections. I think you establish a floor, a baseline. But if you get down to detailing this shit out, like, you're going to have a world in which Democrats are in charge one day and there's going to be 84 pronouns required on every ballot in Walton County, Florida. And so I do think elections need to be state run. And we have seen like states like Georgia be directionally correct on chain of custody, on ballots,
right,
on some things. Not a panacea, not as far as we would go. One idea that Brian Stile, the chairman of the committee that kind of oversees this in Congress, had was, remember when the vouchers was this big debate in the country, and they always talked about DC vouchers, and they did vouchers in DC, Congress did, to showcase that it would make the schools better. And then you saw more states like Florida embrace school choice. It's like, what if we imposed like the best election integrity regime on Washington, D.C.?
Right.
No one could claim it was for partisan purposes.
Right.
It's 92% Democrat.
Yeah.
It's all going Democrat anyway. But what if we did, same day voting in person with an ID, mail-in ballot only with a legitimate excuse, the disabled, the elderly, the infirm, and just like made it the cleanest elections in the world in Washington, D.C.
It's like only Joe Biden.
And then, and then if you go to the places that need to be shamed into better behavior and say, like, if Washington, D.C. can clean this up,
right,
like certainly you can in DeKalb County, Georgia.
So it's really frustrating to see election results in by 9 o'clock in Florida. The victor, right? Yeah. In Florida, might not like the results, but every result by 9 p.m. in Florida. It's like clockwork. Boom, hits. A lot of other countries do that, Argentina and France and so on. And then you have the thing that's going to keep me awake. Mm-hmm. Please don't have it again. But like this weird, it'll take weeks. We won't know. And it'll only be swing states.
Right.
It won't be California. It'll only be swing states. It'll take weeks. Are you expecting more of that?
Yeah, I tell the people in Maricopa County, you don't have to live this way. Like, I always feel like in Maricopa County, someone is in a dark room. They've lit the candles. They've got the Ouija board out, and they're like wondering who won the election. And in Pennsylvania, there's a clear reason why it's different in Florida. In Florida, if people are sending in their mail ballots, every few days you get the local judge, county commissioner, community member, and in front of God and everyone, you open the ballots and you get to count the ballots. And then you're not ending up on election day being like, okay, well, it's election day. We've got all the other normal chaos of election day. And now we're going to start opening and counting 400,000 mail-in ballots. That's the crazy system they have in Pennsylvania. We count them as they come in. So it's why you like small batch whiskey better than the large batch, right? Yeah. You can give care to these small batches of votes, make sure everything's right, proper. It's a person at that address, that the person's alive. You take a little more time on the signatures, see that it's working out. But if, like, I get it. If it's election night and you're like, okay, well, it's time to start counting the 400,000 votes that came in. Now, all of a sudden, you are not resilient to illegitimate ballots polluting and diluting the otherwise legitimate ballots. And I don't know why the legislatures don't change the laws to be like Florida. Like, what is the constituency in some of these states saying, we actually, we want to build the suspense. We don't want to know on election night. What are they, like the people who do Christmas like in early January to get the sales? Like, we want this. This all looks great election day. We want this experience, but we would like it 14 days later on actually getting the result. Is that some sort of weird kink in some of these states where they want to have the pleasure of knowing their election result delayed extensively?
Seems like the plot to get a Democrat elected for the rest of my lifetime is put up a candidate that you can rig enough like good polls against and like do enough media hits, and that candidate can like cruise on election fraud like through on the most razor thin margins where they just algorithmically like push the numbers where they need to be in certain counties. And that system is collapsing because Kamala is actually so bad that no one's going to legitimately believe that she won. Like right. That, like I think they're kicking themselves right now. I actually believe that Joe Biden possibly may have done better through this time period than Kamala Harris. I think they like pulled the trigger and they're regretting it now.
Cool.
I think there's a lot of buyers.
I don't want to get you banned from YouTube.
That's 60 minutes. That 60 minutes was excruciating, bro. And that's the nicest they could be to her, and it was excruciating.
You wonder after that, like, does she walk out, meet with her team, and say, "Well, that went really well"? Like, are the vibes still good? The vibes are always good with her when everything's going to shit for everybody else. Yes, but like, does she like walk out of that and be like, "Nailed it,
nailed it"? Okay, no, but what do you mean conspiratorial? What?
Oh, so no, just the like people say, people say that Kennedy stole the election from Nixon because it was like super close. I mean, it was super close. In Illinois, you get a little bit of ballot stuffing, and it doesn't. And people say that the 2020 election was stolen from Trump because of some of these irregularities we saw in these states. And I think Peter Thiel put it best recently when he said that it's not that they're stealing the election so much as they're fortifying it for themselves. Yeah. It's exactly what you just described. Like a nip here, a tuck there, a change in the law here. Maybe somebody outkicks their bureaucratic discretion by 8% or 12% in a county. That type of thing in a really close election can fortify the party in power in this case. Because they're effectively pulling those strings. I do think our guys at the RNC have done a better job this time, but we had so far to go because we had always put most of our effort into why people vote in the Trump era. Make your economy better, make the world safer, more American pride, get rid of some of these really corrosive things to our culture. They focus on the mechanized process of ballots being counted. Yes. And we're changing that ratio. I can't say that I've got total confidence we've overtaken them in how the focus is allocated. Does that make sense?
It's a heavy electoral ballot registration advantage for Republicans this election, which has never been seen, where the ballots in all swing states and the registrations in all swing states have flipped so many important counties. And I think it's going to be a lot harder to algorithmically defraud people when you have those type of like mountain slopes. And I love taking the tack that most of the country actually agrees with Trump. The vast majority of the country agrees with America First policies. We do this bit all the time. We go out and we ask people, do you want your money to be spent here or in Ukraine? Yeah. And it's like every person, including the Palestinian protesters and the left-wing fucking radicals, pink hairs, they're all like, yeah, spend it here. They all agree. They agree with us. Basic on basics. They agree. The true extremists are actually the people who are in power, and they're becoming incredibly unpopular.
And the centerpiece is the media.
Yeah.
And you talk about the diminution in the power that cable news has, both on the right and the left, to penetrate through and talk to people.
But they're, even that, I think that's where the panic's coming from, right? So it's CNN viewership from 2016 cut in half, right? It's now less than 1 million viewers in prime time. MSNBC cut in half from 2020. 2020 was 2 million. Now it's 1 million. It's that's, dude, and meanwhile, shows humbly ours, Elon Musk, Joe Rogan, Tucker Carlson, it's this explosion of freedom, right? That's the cool thing, right? The cool thing is that the rage against the machine is that. And I think that vibe is why Trump will win black men by historic numbers. I'm sure you are actually privy to probably the real internals of the campaign.
Where the action is working class black men. Black men who wear their name on their shirt and go to work every day and want a better life for their family and love their country. These are patriotic people, and they are welcome in our movement. We are grateful to have them on the team.
Latinos?
Absolutely. That, by the way, that's where the confidence in Arizona and Nevada is coming from.
Interesting.
Is the movement in Hispanic voters, all Hispanic voters. We're doing pretty well with Hispanic women. Now, we do better with men, but we're seeing Hispanic voters drive the optimism in Nevada and in Arizona. Huh. And there was this belief that the way you got the Hispanic vote was for being for open borders. And John McCain, was for a whole lot of amnesty, and compared to Trump, not even close, when you see how this Hispanic vote's going to come in. And the bottom line is, however you got into this country, it is definitely in your best interest to not have an open border tomorrow.
Yes, correct. Yes.
And a lot of even people who have illegal immigration as part of their story or their family story are saying, Well, yeah, but we've definitely got to pull up the ladder on what's coming next. This mass wave of humanity that, despite what's in our heart to want to be charitable to people, America cannot take that. We cannot withstand this. We cannot. We've seen it in the drain on housing resources. We've seen it in the drain on our social services. And at the end of the day, whether it's Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, VA, I mean, almost anything you rely on, if the systems get overwhelmed, you're not going to really be able to enjoy the prosperity that you ought to as an American.
So preview on Trump term 2.0. Okay. Trump term 1.0, obviously rife with a lot of people who I think were sabotaging the president.
Yeah.
I'm sure there'll be no shortage of that this time around too. Donald Trump, odds are the literal smart money is pouring into Trump to win this election. I think he's in a good spot. What happens term 2? Let's say Trump puts you in charge of declassification, and Trump's promised to.
You're going to learn a lot more about UFOs if that happens.
Yeah, that's what I want. Okay, so let's rock on this. Trump says declassification. He's on the trail saying Epstein list, JFK. You're going to find out some of the dirty deeds of your government and who's been protected. Why is the world's foremost pederast protected? This makes no sense. This is evil, right? Everyone agrees on it. It's you got a 99%
on Epstein. Issue. Bill Barr is the one that needs to be called in to give sworn testimony on what happened there at Bureau of Prisons, because that is not that. There's just no way that the story you're getting is the real story there. No freaking way, and Bill Barr knows it.
I think most people believe that, right? It's no way that that's.
I actually think it was I actually think that on Epstein, it was a foreign government that took him out. I don't think it was a domestic enterprise.
Really?
I do. I'm not going to say which one, but I don't think it was domestic inspired to take out of him. I think that was a foreign operation, government sponsored.
So foreign operation took out Epstein inside of our prison.
Yes.
So they must have been allowed to.
Oh, I think it was in concert with people in our government.
Wow.
But not at some, low-level guard getting bribed kind of way.
Yeah.
At a state to state level.
So that's probably a lot of partied interests in keeping that under wraps.
You better believe it. Weapon systems at play, global deals at play.
Interesting. You have evidence to back that up?
I just am positing it as a theory.
Wow. Okay. What about UFOs?
Well, we're learning more each and every day. You're getting the titrated leaking on the UFOs. It's now open source information that the CIA has a program around craft recovery. It's not a question anymore. And so that's probably where I would start: the craft recovery and the biologics that have been taken from those crafts.
Are people going to be ready for that?
I think you got to let it out there. You don't inure to the benefit of the citizenry by keeping those kind of secrets from them. And look, the declassification stuff's going to be important, but depending on the front end, it's going to be personnel. What I think about frequently is how sad I would be if we won the war and lost the peace. If we were to get Trump elected and then watch these subversive Nikki Haley types layer into the government a lot of people who are going to work against the president. And I think that we're way more resilient to that than we were in 2017, because Trump rolls into town in 2017 with a New York Rolodex, and he had to rely on a lot of people in DC to help him build out that government. Now he's got a better sense of people he's worked with, the Kash Patels, the Rick Grinnells, the people who've really been there for him, the governors, the senators who've shown that they're going to, put their shoulder down and really push to get the agenda going. Because if we screw up the personnel, and I'm not even saying the first 100 days of the admin, I'm talking about decisions that have to be made in November and December. If we lose November and December, we could see ourselves again not achieving the max opportunity out of a Trump presidency. I don't think we got as much out of the Trump presidency in 2017 as we would have without some of these people like the James Mattises and Rex Tillersons who were working against against the core philosophy that Trump was putting into place to save the country.
Donald Trump ran on releasing the JFK files. Mike Pompeo stops him, right? Comes tearing into his office and stops him. A well-documented story that's been validated, I think, by both parties. And this is what you're talking about. Like the institutional stopgaps that would like prevent something like that happening, because by law, Donald Trump had every right to release everything about JFK.
Pompeo's an interesting cat. I mean, he very smart guy and knows it. Like, he fundamentally believes he's the smartest guy in the room and probably is right about that. I found myself often in the Trump administration, like locking horns with him on stuff. Like, Pompeo wanted to go to war in Venezuela. It was a crazy idea. Like, Pompeo wanted to like start a war with Iran over a downed drone. I thought the whole reason we had drones was like so that you didn't have to start wars if one of them went down. Pompeo always seemed to be a defender of the Saudis, even when information about them should definitely be declassified around 9/11. And so I have great respect for his intellect, but oftentimes he wanted the Trump presidency to revert to some sort of neoconservative mean in Republican politics, rather than being the bright light of America first that is really embedded in Trump's instinct.
Couldn't believe it. Like, when COVID first broke and nobody knew really what was going on, we had a meeting with Pompeo, and in his office, he said, we're probably just going to have to lock the country down for like 2 weeks, just 2 weeks to slow the spread. And everyone laughed. Everyone laughed. It was like me and a couple other, influencers, podcasters, and everyone just like chuckled because we thought he was joking. But like, wait a second, hold up. Like,
were you ever afraid of COVID?
The plan. Like,
were you
first time? Like,
okay, so I initially was like, I initially saw this thing and like everyone was telling me people were gonna die. It's like at the very beginning, I will have to admit this to you. When like an Amazon package would arrive, I would get the Lysol wipe and white, like just for like a couple days. So I'm not proud of that at all. But then like I remember the day when I was like, I'm no longer afraid of COVID. It is when Chris Christie and Bobby Bowden survived COVID in like the same week. And I'm thinking, Bobby Bowden was like 90 something years old. And I revere the late great Bobby Bowden. But I was like, if at 90 plus, this guy can whoop COVID. And then Chris Christie, who like has never been able to drive by a donut stand at full speed, like if he survived it, I was like, I have nothing to fear. I licked 3 elevator buttons that day when I found out that those people survived COVID.
So that's another thing that should be declassified. Clearly, the government knows so much more about the origins of COVID and the funding of the origin, the creation of that.
We all know. We all know that.
But it'd be nice to have. This was what would be nice.
The FBI said it.
It'd be nice to have somebody. That's exactly right.
We
could be on the side of the FBI here.
Dude, Christopher Wray was throwing bombs at a lot of those other entities. He was like, just so you all know, it was the FBI first who said that it was the lab leak, that it wasn't the smearing of the pangolin.
Yeah.
Wouldn't you love to be the pangolin's lawyer?
I'd have a pangolin as a pet, walk around on a leash if I could. It's a cool looking animal. I'm not gonna eat them. They said it was bat soup.
Yeah,
this is bad soup.
No, but it jumps from like
more racist. Like if you think about it, more racist that like Chinese people are like ripping up bats and eating them. Like that's actually more racist than saying that some sophisticated biological laboratory that
we funded
that does horseshoe bat coronaviruses, specifically manipulating them to be infectious to humans. That something leaked from there, given the fact that Xi Li, who's the bat doctor at that laboratory, has a long history of leaking this shit and working with Dr. Fauci.
And our own State Department cables in 2018 said this shit is not safe. Like, right. This is gonna leak.
It's illegal. Yeah, them and Ebright, him and Ebright, like everyone knows how this.
Well,
went down.
The whole bat pangolin thing was a Fauci constructed cover up.
Yes.
Because he knew that coronavirus had come out of that lab. And so he knew that all that led right back to him. So he used the imprimatur of this great credibility that the country bestowed on him for no reason. And he was like, oh yeah, it's just the pangolin's not going to be able to like deny these claims.
Bro, you should totally be in charge of declassification. Trump's promised all this. So the Epstein list, real quickly, let's go through it. The Epstein list. The government knows who the clients were.
Oh, absolutely.
And so why wouldn't they? These people are engaging in criminal activity. This is some of the darkest shit. Like you can't defend it. right? What happened on the island. I'm not saying everyone he ever shook hands with is guilty of it, but he did go to Bill Clinton's White House like dozens of times. Bill Clinton did fly on the Lolita Express dozens of times. And when we found out the testimony from those young women that was just unsealed, they're naming Bill Clinton. They're putting Bill Clinton on that island. And so it's like, is it to protect the institution of the American government? Like they don't want the information to get out that Bill Clinton is such a monster because it actually crumbles the legitimacy of the institution. Is that why he's being protected?
No. What do I tell you? Dude, who do you think what do you think Epstein is? Okay.
Intel.
Of course.
For probably a foreign nation.
Right.
Maybe
right. But let's not name it. Let's not smear any nations. But Epstein is working for a foreign government, and his job is to bait these powerful Americans into these compromising circumstances as a method of compromise. Like, this is not a really novel theory of espionage. It goes on all the time. And so he's creating the honeypot. He's getting them stuck in the honeypot, and he has all that. So if you start releasing the client list, don't think about it in terms of how powerful they are. Think about in terms of how powerful the compromise is. Because once you know the clients, then you're going to know the deliverables. Like, you think they just got that information on people and then just kept it and said, don't be naughty? No, those people then had taskings that they had to do for Epstein's bosses. And so everyone thinks that the client list isn't out because the people on the list are so powerful. And there may be a feature of that, but it's actually what was being delivered back as a function of the extortion that I think is what a lot of powerful people in our government don't want exposed.
Because they would be a part of this operation, because it would like implicate the American government in part of the scheme.
Let me just, all right, let's break it down this way. Let's say, country X, and I actually think there were probably multiple countries involved in running Epstein, but country X is running Epstein. Yeah. Epstein gets a powerful person into a compromising situation, and then country X really needs to sell a widget to the United States, right? Now all of a sudden they can put pressure on that powerful official to get that widget purchased. Sure. Now assume that widget doesn't work, and we have it. It was just a way to facilitate the money laundering and the payoff. Well, now you got to be able to explain that. Right. And let's assume some very powerful company makes that widget and makes billions of dollars on that widget. Now you're doing more than impacting Bill Clinton's reputation. You're impacting a multi-billion-dollar revenue stream, and people get killed for that stuff.
Right. And he did get killed for it, but before he got killed, he was let out of prison for those exact same crimes, for the underage crimes here in Florida.
Why do you think that was?
Acosta says under testimony, I think he might have been on the committee. He's he belongs to Intel. Alex Acosta said it. He belongs to Intel.
Yeah. When you're the
what does that mean? He belongs to Intel, right?
That means somebody shows up at your office when you're the prosecutor, and they say this person has to be put back into the information stream, and they need to be out of this problem so that they can be leveraged and utilized.
The American government flexed its muscle to protect a terrorist.
I don't even think this is the only example.
Wow. So that's why we may never know unless somebody has the full-throated capacity to go in and muscularly declassify all.
And put at jeopardy revenue streams that make people very rich and very powerful potentially to this day.
Yeah, obviously. You're right. Is this the same Diddy? Is this a Diddy thing?
No.
Is this similar?
I have no idea.
Yeah. Okay. The operation seems similar, right? The video cameras, the politicians, the people at the parties. It seems on paper, it seems like a similar.
I guess the reason with Epstein the
same prison cell in Manhattan.
But with Epstein believing that this guy's got a backstory that you wouldn't even believe if he was a character on Lost.
Yeah.
Okay. Whereas the Diddy thing is, maybe a little more, you can associate it with at the time what kind of the worst parts of hip hop culture in that era. But with Epstein, it's just so obviously an intel op. Maybe you'll see the same in Diddy's case. I don't know. I haven't seen that evidence.
Yeah. Feds were really excited to raid, grab as many videotapes as they could. Okay. All right. It makes you want to scratch a head scratcher. So biologics on UFOs.
Okay.
You know,
What time? How long have we? Jesus, how long have we been doing
I
this?
mean, I don't know. My producers keep telling me we have to wrap, but
I'm not. You know what? UFOs we're gonna have to save for next time.
Right.
I just told you though, it should be at the top of the list on declassification.
Okay.
Yeah, that'll be my cliffhanger.
All right, fine. Final message to people. The hurricane is supposed to hit in the next 24 hours.
Mm-hmm.
Final message out here. We're on the panhandle right now, so this is not going to be an impact area. This is why I brought my family up here.
Yeah. Benny's doing like a regular Clyde W. Griswold. He loaded up the whole fam, got in the car, went on the long road trip.
Christmas tree on top.
And so when I came in here to see him, his daughters are there, watching television, and one of his cute daughters turns to him and says, "I'd like a book." So if you're wondering whether or not Benny Johnson is raising up a trad little batch of family members, they are tired of the streaming. They are tired of the Disney. They want books in this in the Johnson household. Look, I want to end the same way I started. We've got the Pensacola Bay Center open. If you do not have the resources for hotels or rentals, that should not be the reason you have to put your life in jeopardy in a low-lying area on the Florida Gulf Coast. And so, as we say in the South, y'all come. We're ready for you at the Pensacola Bay Center. Got plenty of assets, plenty of resources, and it won't be an experience that you'll regret. Certainly, compared to this storm surge is going to be very serious. And just with the way Florida is shaped, you push that much water kind of into the Tampa Bay area, where you've already had a lot of saturation, there's going to be very serious flooding. And so don't wait too long. We'll help you out here in Pensacola and make sure that you're cared for properly.
Don't listen to Kamala Harris. Kamala Harris says, do not come. You
can. Yeah. No, we will not be unburdened by what has been. We'll have to rebuild in a lot of places, but we'll be ready for it.
We'll be ready for it. I have a lot of confidence in the state. Very proud of the governor. I think he's crushing it right now. And a lot of the state reps, some of the best members of Congress come from the state, yourself included, with big audiences to warn people and give out good information. I think that's really unsung virtue of having a huge big audience. You can inform people accurately in times like this.
Yeah, Rep Luna's doing a great job for our constituents. That's a sound of freedom. If you ever come to Northwest Florida, the two things you will not miss are our bases and our beaches. It's,
that's right.
Bases and beaches. That's an F-35 right there. In fact, yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Awesome.
It's one of the 30% of them that can fly.
Maybe something else you could declassify. What the hell is going on?
Yeah. That we'll you know what? I'll come back. We'll do the Benny show on the F-35 and UFOs. How about that?
Great.
That'll be our next episode.
Which one is which? Yeah, that's right. Okay. Congressman, thank you.
Good seeing you, man. I gotta roll.
The biggest ships in the sea, all owned by the oldest kings, and their dying legacy, media deal weeds. Soon will the Benny Show come to mind. The salt from lives for fun. Leave the gold and bring the gun. We sail for #1. Show come to mind. The salt from lives for fun. Leave the gold and bring the gun. We sail for #1. The biggest ships in the sea, all owned by the oldest king.